What's up, rockers? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, Instagram at talklouder_podcast. And of course, our website, talklouderpodcast.com, where you can find links to our merch and our previous episodes. Man, I am excited about today's guest. We have Rich Jones and Billy Hopeless from the Black Halos. And one of the reasons I'm excited is I've been a fan of these guys for a long time, and I don't feel like they got a whole lot of press or attention in the United States, but they have a new album out. It's called How the Darkness Doubles. It dropped November 25th. And Rich Jones, the guitarist, is also the guitarist and a primary songwriter in the Michael Monroe band, which, as you know, I'm a huge fan of. And Billy Hopeless, for my money, has one of the most unique voices in rock. And together, the Black Halos, for those who don't know, I don't know, just to summarize, I'd say their influences are somewhere in between the Dead Boys, Alice Cooper, and maybe the Misfits, kind of dark goth punk, garage rock kind of stuff, real gritty, good stuff. And I'm glad to have them on the podcast today.
If you were to sort of hybrid the things that you're mentioning, and they even talk about it in this episode about comparisons to the Dolls and the Dead Boys and things like that. And how maybe they don't hear that because they're too close to it. I have to kind of agree, like, you're well versed in the band's material and I am not, and it's a true confession. I think I made a good fly on the wall, and I think that we all had a great time in this episode. But back to what I was saying, the importance of the scope of the Black Halos is they're writing what they know, and we prod them and talk about that quite a bit as well. Like, it sounds to me like Rich writes the way that Rich writes.
Yeah.
And I think that Billy is being himself 100% all of the time. So when you get that sort of marriage, you have a tone and a color that you are. Whether your fan base that you've built, because obviously these guys have worked their ass off with some constant touring, and they talk about that.
Yeah.
Even though they had quite a long break just by the laws of man and life gets in the way kind of shit. They don't hear the comparisons to the Dead Boys, but when you think about what you and I just described, you go like, wow, okay. They're kind of like this or that or the other, but when you hear it, you hear everything. So you can't say, oh, they're like the Dead Boys. You can't just leave it. It's open-ended. It's a bouquet. It's not one thing.
Yeah, I threw out a couple band names just as points of reference, but I
love it. And I love it. And it made me think about what those guys were saying in the interview about how they don't hear what other people hear. So.
Right. And that's to be expected. I mean, there's probably people that talk about your bands and they say, I hear this and I hear that, and you go, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun having him on the show. I'm a big fan of Rich, his work with the Michael Monroe band. He's a primary songwriter on the previous two records from Michael Monroe, and those are great records. And it's the first time that he and Billy and their other guitar player, Jay, have put out a proper full-length album in 21 years. So it's great to see them back together, joining forces again, and the resulting album is fantastic. So if you're a fan of their hallmark album, if you will, is called The Violent Years. It came out in 2001, and they even say in the interview that this would have been a nice continuation from that time period, and I have to agree. So if you're a fan of The Violent Years, check out the new album. It's called How the Darkness Doubles, the Black Halos, today on the Talk Louder podcast. We have a new album to talk about, How the Darkness Doubled, the latest album from the Black Halos. First time that you guys have joined forces in like 20 21 years or something like that. So what took so long?
Yeah, why don't you tell us how you really feel, Dave?
Well, as a fan, I've been waiting a long time, so I figure I got the two guys here that can give me the answer.
It's funny, right? When you say like 20 years, I'm like, oh my God, it feels so old, you know?
Well, thank God Dave wasn't holding his fucking breath.
Yeah, right.
He'd be dead and blue and something.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, go ahead. 20 some years.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, just life kind of happens to you. I moved. We were in Vancouver originally when the band was happening last time, and I moved to London. I lived there for like 10 years. I lived in Berlin for like 5 years.
Wow.
So doing a band together was a little tricky, and it kind of came back together like pretty organically. Me and Billy did a tour of Spain in 2016, and to be honest with you, we're like, if we're going to do a tour of Spain, then maybe we should record something. And then from there, it was like long distance writing, and it came back together in this way where it wasn't forced, which is I think a good way to do it. I think it's why it's gone well so far.
Yeah, I think that when we went to Spain, we got real drunk. We had a lot of fun, and I think that really helped, because sometimes when you're drunk, the best laid plans really come together. And
really, that never seems to happen.
And then Jay seemed to. We told Jay we got back, and I remember like getting back and talking to Jay, and Rich talked to Jay and saying, we had a great time in Spain, and I'm still hungover. And I think Jay went, well, man, I want to be hungover with you guys, and I want to have a good time too. So that really helped. And, you go to Spain's it's just a great place. It's a lot of fun. It can really do wonders for you. I suggest everyone go there.
Wow. So, but prior to the new album, you guys actually did regroup a little bit, and this might've been the result of some of that long distance writing you were talking about. You put out that EP. I'm going to mangle the title Geisterbahn 2 or something like that.
Yeah, that's it.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. And that was sort of the initial coming together of you guys again after a long time. Is that right?
Well, I put out this solo single, and I asked Rich to play on it. And Rich said, yeah, he'd play on it. And I think that sort of really got me going. I was like, wow, and then when we went to Spain, it's like that we actually didn't have anything really to sell besides that. So it was kind of like, well, do you want to do this song? And Rich was like, nah, but we should do the Halos. I think that really, set the spark for the Geisterbahn single and the songs on that. And I remember when we were in Spain, there was sort of the plan was, okay, well, let's start writing. But of course, you're having a good time in Spain, you're drinking a lot, and that's what you can, right?
I'm seeing a theme here.
Yeah, we didn't write a damn thing in Spain.
Had a great time.
Well, the Geisterbahn thing was sort of a reintroduction of the two of you guys and Jay working together again. And I remember I reviewed it for my website, Too Fast to Die. And it was like trying to review a 3-song EP. I wanted more to work with, but I couldn't not review it because those 3 songs were so good. And I like the variation too. There was kind of the Tandem Drown. I thought was a nice, slower song. Yeah, it was good stuff.
Love that one.
Yeah. It might be my favorite on there as well. So that brings us up.
I forgot we released that.
Well, yeah. When I knew I was going to talk to you guys today, I was brushing up on my Black Halos, and I remembered. Wait a minute, this new album isn't the latest thing they've done. They did that EP, and I need to find that again. So I dug it up and revisited it. But then, so that brings us to How the Darkness Doubled. First of all, is there any significance to the title?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things about it. The title comes from a lyric from the song Marquee Moon by Television, which I always really liked. I thought, it was a great lyric.
It's a great song.
Yeah. And it's the line, I remember how the darkness doubled, and originally we were going to make, our third record in 2002 or whatever. And we were like, this is the title,
Yeah.
And then it just always stuck in my head all these years, you know. And so when we were talking about doing this record, we're like, let's call it that, you know, because in a way, you know, it's the first record we made together in 20 years, you know, me, Billy, and Jay, the other guitar player. And so I'm like, it's kind of fitting that we kind of go with the title of what that next record was going to be anyways, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we were drunk in the van, I think, after a show or something, and we were listening to Marky Moon album, and that came on, and that subject came up of, yeah, you know, that'd be a great album title. And, you know, it does. It really makes a lot of sense to me, because I remember when I first met Rich Jones, we won't go into the details on that time, but it's always been sort of that way to me. I've always looked like, wow, you know, we could be brothers in so many ways. It's you know, when we hate each other, we hate each other. When we love each other, we love each other. But it's really, you know, it's sort of that. It's like, wow, I finally found someone that thinks like I do. That's terrible. That's terrible news for the earth. People on this planet, you know, that was like, oh God, dude, I've had, like, my wife said that. She's always said, like, oh God, she said it was like there was two of you, and that's terrible.
I know. I'm like, is this a compliment or an insult? I can't tell.
It's kind of like, man, I wish Rich was here. Wow, I wish Billy was here. Well, we could just clone you, and it said, oh shit.
One is enough.
Yeah.
But so, you know, the good thing about it though is because, you know, we've been friends for, you know, almost 30 years. The band's been a band for almost 30 years. When it came to writing long distance, I kind of already knew, I'm like, this is going to work. This isn't going to work. And so we ended up writing, like, a lot of this record was written like from me living in Berlin and Billy in Vancouver. And then even me moving back to Canada and him in Vancouver. I mean, we pretty much did everything remotely, you know, but I felt pretty confident that we could. Because of time working together.
Let's talk about that for a second, if you don't mind. I mean, obviously that's the new way. It's very normal now, especially since lockdowns and shit. But that's been, I mean, I've been writing that way for 10 years or more. Right. Because I'm writing with people, well, like say exactly what you just described. They're not even in the same state or the same country. So it's just like the fucking normal thing. If you can create a WAV file with a microphone, you can make a fucking record. So,
we used to do it with cassettes.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, sure.
We wouldn't hang out together a lot, even, you know, back in the early days. So it'd be like, here, I'd record something on a little voice cassette and then end up dropping it to Rich, and vice versa. It's like a lot of that stuff where it's like you get an idea and record it back then on cassettes. Now it's just, we've got more better technology.
Sure. Text and voicemail bullshit, like just melodies and lyric lines and whatever. Yeah, you're just forwarding shit. It's definitely the norm now. Do you feel like, compared to being sweaty in the garage and writing like this way, do you feel like there is a difference in the way that you know, the emotional value comes across in your songs?
No.
I agree. I agree with you. I actually agree with you. But I do feel like if all of us in this room here didn't know what that is, like sweating in the garage as a band and writing a song that way and emotionally attached to what you're feeling and hearing as it's coming together, and knowing that that's the shit, you wouldn't know what you were looking for, not entirely, if you were doing it via satellite.
No, it's kind of like organic versus factory farmed vegetables. I can't really tell the difference, honestly. You know, when I go and it's like they're charging me more for organic stuff, organic pasta. I can't tell the difference between that and other pasta. It tastes the same.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the listener and I'm sorry to interrupt. The listener doesn't really know what it is that, you know, how the track was born. They don't know that they're not really going to one song to another and go, this was recorded analog, written in a garage when these guys were 15, and this was written when they were 30 via the internet. You know, can you tell the difference? It's not a forum. Does the song kick ass or does it not kick ass?
Yeah, totally. That's what it comes down to. I mean, the Misfits recorded like on so many bands. Well, you look at like even the Beatles and stuff recorded on 4 tracks, right?
Right.
4 and 8 tracks.
Yeah, and Easy Top, same. Yeah.
Oh, those guys were shit. Right? So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it also depends though on what you're doing, especially musically. I think if you had a band that was like the MC5 with these kind of like big jams and everything's kind of going wild and falling apart and coming together, you're not going to do that, right?
Yeah, loose. Yeah.
You're not going to do that unless you all get in a room together.
Yeah.
But I think when you're kind of like, let's put a song together, let's structure it and do all that, then it works. And
that's a very, 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 very good point. Whether it be Sign of the Times or, I mean, I'm sure that if you could get the drummer and maybe like the bass player or something to put together a jam track, I'm sure the rest of the people could cut on top of that and it would feel like what you described. But yeah, you're right. That's a really, really strong point. And I think it's worth talking about. Okay, and rant over.
Let's run down some of the songs. Tenement Kids, the first single. I love it. I love the video. Why did you choose it as the first single? Because there's a lot of strong contenders on this record. What made that one your first choice for single?
The record company.
The truth. I love these guys. They're brutally honest.
I mean, we had a short list, but I think I don't think there's a lot of value in fighting with your record company over what they want to release from the record. I'm like, we're not going to put stuff on the record that we don't believe in anyway. So I'm like, this is kind of our short list, and hopefully they kind of feel the same way, and they did. So I think they picked like three or four songs to kind of start with, and one of them we'd already released as a single, so we're like, just get rid of that, and then it just kind of became obvious that was going to be the one. So it wasn't. It was actually kind of weirdly easy.
Were you was there any concern on your end that this would be your first reintroduction after 20 years? Did you give it a little more thought than maybe you normally would, that hey, we need to come out with a bang, so we're really feeling this song versus that song as a single?
I thought that more about the record than about like how it was going to be marketed. You know what I mean? Like, because that's really what it is, right?
Yeah.
The video is a commercial for your record.
Sure.
And so, for me, it was more important, like, this record's got to kick ass. It's got to sound great. The songs got to be good. We can't put out something half-assed after all this time. So that was really like where my head was at with all of it. I don't know about if you cared or not, Billy.
Yeah, I think once, I remember when you sent me the chorus idea, and I work in social housing overnight, and I was like, oh, when he gave me the title on the chorus, I was like looking around going, well, yeah, this is exactly, do I know this is what I'm doing right now? And I was like, this is going to write itself. But as soon as the first lyric came out of my mouth of crooks and castles, cracks and assholes, I was like, this is it. This song is really great. We're really onto something here. This is like great prose I'm writing. And so, yeah, I think, it makes a lot of sense. That song made a lot of sense. It's a really good rocking song. And, it kicks you where you live. And that's really, that's how it is. It's really important. I think that song it's a very good statement for the times we're living in. And it really kicks you in the nuts.
Yeah.
That's what you want. Like you said, you want a bull coming out of the chute. That one really has that, right from crooks and castles, cracks and assholes. You're writing something that's going to kick in the nuts.
Right. Yeah. I think it was whoever made the decision, it was a great choice. And as Rich says, I mean, you could have basically thrown a dart at the album and any song it hit would have been fine.
Oh, they're all fantastic.
Yeah. Which leads me to Better Days. You just released this as the second single yesterday or the day before or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And Rich, I saw something in some of the press release that basically you were saying that this was a riff that originated as a Michael Monroe. It's something you had written for Michael Monroe band.
We did. Last summer, was it last summer? I guess the previous summer. Now we started doing pre-production for a Michael Monroe record in Finland, and I just, I'd written a lot already, and I felt like the record was kind of missing something with where we were going at the time. And I'm like, I can bash one of these out in 10 minutes. And it was really kind of like that, the original version of it. It was pretty quick. And, it was just kind of one of those like kind of songs.
Yeah.
And we ended up kind of taking that record a different way. But I'm like, this is a pretty good song still. So I sent it to the Black Halos guys, and I'm like, I have this if you guys want it. But normally me and Billy co-write everything. So I'm like, I totally get it if you don't want to sing this or if you don't want to do it. But he was like, no, man, it's cool. So it ended up working out really good. I actually think it works better with this band than it would have with Michael. So
yeah. And one of the things I heard, and I heard this going back to the Geisterbahn EP, is you have a very distinctive stamp, Rich. And it's like, I look at the last two, I'm a huge fan of the Michael Monroe band, as everybody who listens to this podcast probably knows. But because I rant about you guys all the time. But I hear there's a lot of songs on the Geisterbahn EP and on this latest Black Halos record that I listen to the guitar tones and the riffs and the way the choruses are put together. And I can imagine them being Michael Monroe songs. And I looked at the credits on the Monroe records, the past two records, you're all over those things. And I think it's just, I'm just pointing out the fact that I think you have a very distinctive sound. And you take the Michael Monroe band and you take the Black Halos and you swap the vocalists, and it's almost interchangeable to my ears.
Yeah. I think the Black Halos stuff is a little darker.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I was going to, if I may, Rich's footprint is there. It's like, there's a Yeti. Oh, Rich was here again. Then you got, the Abominable Snowman shows up. That's not Rich, but that's Rich, and Rich has been here. So that obviously you can see Michael coming a mile away, but when Billy is singing on your somewhat interchangeable style of writing, I think it takes off to another level of grit.
Yeah.
It's definitely darker with Billy singing.
Yeah, I mean, you choose which grit of sandpaper you like the most. There's grit. I mean, Michael's got grit, but it ain't Billy grit, right?
No, it ain't.
Yeah. Right. I don't think anybody's got Billy grit.
It's a compliment. It's a compliment to the writing, a compliment to Billy, compliment to the lyric, right?
Well,
that all comes together on the album too, because Michael does a duet with Billy on the record. So
and even better, right?
I was just going to go there. Speaking of Michael and Billy, simultaneously, you guys share vocals on "Ready to Snap."
Yeah.
Song off the new album, which is actually a cover of the Wanderers, a Stiv Bators band from 1981. So. Tell me how you settled on that as a cover, and then it's pretty obvious how Michael got involved, but what was it like collaborating with him? Did he send his vocals over the internet and then you guys just kind of spliced it together? Tell us a little bit about that song.
I think, did you pick it, Billy? I can't remember.
Yeah, well, me and Rich, when we first met and stuff, it's like, along with the Dolls and like the Stooges and stuff, I mean, we're devout followers of the Church of the Master Bators. And so, really, I think it was like anything that he put out, we're pretty much like, same like the Dolls. It's like anything that you'd get Johnny Thunder, Stiv Bators, anything like that, we're all over it. And the Wanderers album, I remember like me and Rich both like going, man, some really great songs on here if they got rid of those keyboards. Those terrible keyboards. But still, even though with those terrible keyboards, you couldn't help but listen to that album over and over again because, hey, it's Stiv, right? And that's that song. Just I always thought that was like, coming from me and the way I think in life. There's certain songs when I hear a song, and I think most people when you hear a song, I can really relate to that. Mm-hmm. Exactly what the singer is singing, and I can really relate to it. Well, that's one of them for me where I'm like, that song I can totally relate.
Yeah. I mean, the way we recorded it, it was kind of weird, slightly convoluted because I did like a demo at my house, and then it was like, okay, this is actually sounding pretty good as the demo is, and I kind of chopped up the arrangement and stuff. And then it was like, well, we'll just get Danny, our drummer. He can just, replace the drums on it. And then one by one, we kind of replaced stuff. And then we had a finished version with just Billy singing. And that was, that already sounded pretty good. And I guess I must have mentioned it to Michael. And then he was like, oh, really? And and I'm like, you want to sing on it? And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, that'd be amazing. So I ended up in the spring in Finland. I had like my laptop and I just had a little interface with me in my apartment. And he came over and we basically just tracked the thing in like an hour or something. You know, he did like 3 or 4 takes and they were all great. I'm like, this is great, man. I'll just cut it together with what Billy did already, you know, and it worked out really well, I thought. So
yeah, and you made a mic stand out of that luggage.
We didn't have a mic stand, so Michael had a suitcase with him, and he kind of pulled the handle up and then like taped the mic to the top of the handle and then put it on a chair. I'm like, man, if people could see this, you know.
Oh, right there.
That's my kind of shit right there. That MacGyver crap. I love that.
Oh, it's, you know, I have a photo of it somewhere. I'll send it over.
It should be fucking on the album cover of him.
Yeah.
Seriously.
The telescopic handle on the. It's fucking great.
I'll never hear that song the same way again. Now,
yeah, you can just picture him singing into a suitcase, you know.
Yeah. let me ask you this: how come he just didn't hold the mic?
Yeah, I don't know.
You know,
weird.
It's a person's choice.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're right. Why do I give a shit, right?
Yeah. Well, you know what though? He kind of gets into it too.
Yeah.
He kind of gets into it in the studio. You know, I mean, he'll kind of be like this, and I can imagine the recording maybe wouldn't have been as good, but
right.
Yeah. So tell me the song Frankie Come Home. Who is Frankie?
Oh, you know, it's you know, the Cray brothers. They were like the London gangsters.
Okay.
It's about the Cray brothers. They were these twins that like ruled like the East London in the 60s, you know, these kind of murderous East London gangsters. Wow. And there's a movie called Legend with Tom Hardy plays both brothers in the movie. Oh, right. And the line is actually from that movie. And it's kind of loosely about that.
Oh, wow.
Don't worry, I didn't know anything about it either until Rich told me. Like, honestly, like I've written pretty much all the lyrics except maybe like a chorus thing that Rich has come up with for Halo songs. And so that was the thing when Rich was like that Better Days song and then this one. Rich was like, I've got these songs, I wrote the lyrics to them. And I've had other people write lyrics to me and just went, no, fuck you, it's shit. I'm not singing that.
Right.
And I was like, both these songs, I was like, these are fantastic, you know, and do I mind singing that? I won't sing someone else's lyrics. No, but I won't sing shitty lyrics. But these are fantastic songs. And I was like, of course I'll sing these. And this song really, when Rich, I didn't know anything about the Cray brothers until Rich told me. And I was like, same thing. Well, what's this about? And Rich told me. So I watched, instead of watching the movie, I watched the documentary on them. And I was like, oh, this is really fascinating. And yeah, that's something I wouldn't have written. That's awesome. I'm stoked on that. You know, I'm singing about a topic I wouldn't have even written about. And no, it's fantastic. So, and I love the song. So yeah, I think it's great.
The shit, we all learned something today from Rich.
Yeah.
Educate and inform, you know?
There's your history lesson on the Talk Louder podcast.
Quest for Fire. Well, you know, it was a book. And
so, Billy, you're talking about writing lyrics. I don't know exactly what you do for a living, but I get the idea that you spend a lot of time by yourself and overnight and that sort of thing. Do you get? Does your inspiration come to you in those times of solitude, or do you tend to like sit down and say, I'm gonna write something, or does things just come to you in the middle of the night while you're, you know, doing whatever you do for a living around?
Other times it's, as I say, immediately just comes to you. But I work in Vancouver right now. Our homeless situation, it's like we're like old school Detroit down here right now. Literally, like the crime level, the poverty on the street. There's tent cities. Like I live in Gastown, and 2 blocks away, you've got the whole street is tents filling the streets. Right now, ever since I was a kid, I used to come down to this area, Hastings. It's like our Skid Row, our bad area. And ever since I was a kid, I always come to Gastown and Hastings. And then I've always had this sort of thing where I'd hang out with people that didn't have the sort of easy walk in life down here. I made best friends, got in a lot of trouble. And I've always found sort of my best allegiances down around here. So I was looking for a job, and I got in this thing, social housing. It's a government job. and basically housing people that are poor and people that are out on the street and giving them housing. And a lot of people have, some issues and stuff, but I can relate to them more than I can, like, say, like a banker or a business guy. I usually get along with them better. So a lot of my writing, you write what you know, and a lot is the environment around you. That and also touring a lot. A lot of the albums written from just the fact of touring. So these reckless tours we did, like years of touring nonstop. And, when you look back at some of that now and you don't realize it when it's happening. It used to. In fact, I'd write was on tour in our van on tour. But now looking back and stuff, it's like, it's even more easy to write. It's like, oh yeah, I know. I want to get back out there. God, that was terrible. And yeah, you're right.
It's funny. Out of the four of us, which guy would you think works for the government?
Right.
I don't know. I think we could give him a pretty fucking good guess, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be hard. It would be hard for them to guess, I think.
Yeah. True.
More and more Narcan into your system and like give you mouth to mouth and pump your chest while you're overdosing.
Jeez.
Wow.
Man.
Yeah.
All another day at the office, huh?
Wow.
Yeah. Needs to do it. Someone's got to be there, right?
That's true. Someone's got to do it. So thank you for doing it. I'm sure it's much appreciated.
People can relate to who understands the situation, and then some Skippy McPickle fresh-faced kid who's looking going, oh my God, because that kid's not going to get it done in time.
No, they're gonna Google it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fucking true. You guys know it. They're gonna Google it. What do I do? Oh, they're not even dialing 911 or whatever. 999. They're fucking Googling.
I wouldn't want Skippy McPickle, and when I woke up, I wouldn't want Skippy McPickle shaking me going, are you okay? I'd want me going, hey man, that was close.
The story that guy died, he couldn't get on the Wi-Fi,
Right. Wow, that shit is real though, man.
Yeah.
Another song on the album, and then we'll move on. But I just wanted to focus on the album because it's pretty solid. There was a track on there called "Forget Me Not." And not is spelled with a K. So I was curious and by the way, it's a super catchy song. I'm driving around listening to it in my car, and it's got this lyric it's talking about old time rock and roll and just being in love with rock and roll. And there's a line in there that says, with the yeah, yeah, yeahs and the whoa, whoa, whoas. And it sounds so simplistic, but it's absolutely perfect for that song and that spot in that song. And it's stuck in my head. So tell me, number one, why is the title written with a K, Forget Me Not? And then what's the inspiration behind that song besides possibly just a tribute to the love of rock and roll?
Well, the knot thing, it's like, I like old stuff. I like a lot, I sang about the flea circus at one time, and I've always got a thing for nostalgia. And, you used to tie a knot around your finger, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that whole thing, tie a knot around your finger to remember things. And
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's sort of where that sort of comes in. I like plays on words too. And, I just say earlier how the computer has made us really stupider because I can remember my parents' phone number, their postal code, their address. I can't remember my password I made yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Back then we had to remember things. And that sort of thing would be like, well, if I tie a little piece of rope around my finger, I won't forget. Well, I don't think people are really forgetting as much as we are nowadays, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, musically, that song, it's funny to me, like the band used to get compared to the New York Dolls a lot. And I'm like, I don't hear it. I love the New York Dolls, but I'm like, I didn't hear it at all in what we were doing. And I'm like, it'd be kind of fun to do something like that. And it was right around the time that Sylvain passed as well. And I played at the tribute thing they did, like there was like a live stream thing. And my head was kind of in that space. I'm like, we kind of, it'd be cool to do a song that was more that vibe because it's really different for the band, I think. Yeah. So that's where it kind of went musically. And then Billy just kind of, like, I think the first thing you sent me back, I'm like, man, you just nailed it right away, So.
Hey, and that's it. I think, see, Rich was going with the doll thing. I think I was sort of hitting that Ian Hunter moment, right? I was going.
That's also fair, yeah.
Yeah, I was hitting the hoop. I was like slam dunking the hoople there. And I think that sort of like, yeah. And that's it. Like, you know, I've loved rock and roll since I was a kid. It's been like my whole mission in life. My greatest love has been rock and roll throughout the ages, from like the 50s stuff all the way up. And when it comes down to it, that's sort of it. The yeahs and the whoas. That's really, you know, those that's it. You gotta love those. When you're writing a song, I think people sort of don't realize that, you know, the Misfits, the Ramones, any great band, the things you love, from the Beatles going, "She loves you, yeah," how simplistic that was. But hey, it worked, didn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't you singing along, kids?
You know, one thing I say to Sammy Yaffa a lot, who plays in Michael's band with me, you know, because we talk about different kinds of music, and I'm like, you know, the guys like us that play rock, I'm like, we're kind of like the jazz guys were now, like when we were younger. You know, there's not a lot of like young kids that listen to guitar rock anymore. You know, we're kind of like a little bit like old people music. You know what I mean? If you think about what like rock is on the radio now, it's fucking Imagine Dragons or whatever. I'm like, you know, right. I don't hear any rock in that at all.
No.
Right.
And I'm like, that's kind of, unfortunately, and I think like Jan Wenner said it recently too, right? He was talking about the Rock Hall of Fame. He's like, rock's over. It's like jazz now. And people were laughing at him. I'm like, I kind of been saying that for a long time. Though. It does feel a little bit like that, you know. There's a fan base there for sure, but it's like, you know, the Grammy Awards. It's like, you know, they give out the Rock Awards before the thing's even on TV these days. Right. You know, it's kind of it's a lot more. It doesn't dominate music like it used to, you know.
Yeah, but I'd like to do devil's advocate here and say that I think, you know, like with things like who would have figured electro swing would have come out, right? And that the thing about kids nowadays, and I think when Retro World sort of nailed that, our song Retro World, is that it's just going to keep going around because there's always some kid who's going to look and go, and I don't get it at times why, because there's better technology out there, but there's some kid who's going to look and go, typewriter, cool. And that, like, you know, I think with rock and roll, with music, it's the same thing. Like when we were listening to music, I remember when I'm being a kid, and you'd always listen to stuff before you and go, I was always looking for stuff that was before my time and going, oh, this is really cool. And now it's like, I listen to like jazz and I listen to like a lot of old, really old stuff as well. And I go, you're always on the search for that thing that's sort of like, well, no one else is into this and I'm into it. So if it is that kids aren't into it right now, I think that's really cool because that means it's going to be a research. Whenever something becomes hip and cool, it gets overblown and then it ends up being discarded. And then some kid walks into Value Village and goes, or like your thrift store and goes, oh man, I'm going to start wearing this again. This is cool and edgy because no one's wearing this. And then suddenly everyone looks and goes, I'm going to wear a trucker baseball cap too, man. All right. And then everyone does it again and it becomes unpopular again. And, you know, saying that glam is on a resurge. And I'm like, glam's on a research again?
Yeah, this is turning into like the Get Off My Lawn podcast.
Right. I have this theory.
I think people forget that like there was a Christmas Story 2 movie made a few years back. And as I said, nowadays we forget things and we're getting dumber that they forget that. And now they're going, hey, there's a new Christmas Story movie, Christmas Story 2 coming out. And everyone's like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's like, well, they just did one a few years ago. You just forgot about it. And the same thing happens where rock and roll, it's going to keep coming back and it keeps, like our type of rock and roll, it disappears for a while and then everyone jumps on a new bandwagon, but people keep coming back to it. I mean, it just seems to always go that way. And then some kid looks and goes, you guys, I've never heard music like that before. And I'm like, well, it's been around for a long time, but that's cool as long as you're getting into it.
Yeah. I have this theory that, you know, it never really goes away. And I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, but it never goes anywhere. And it's not really dormant because there's people out there in this room that it doesn't go away for you. You always have liked what you have always liked. And all of us can say that too. We wear it on our sleeve, who we are all the fucking time. So there's no question, like just because this new thing is trendy and comes in, you know, I can watch the dollar bill blow right by me. And there's a lot of people that are chasing that. Well, that means they have to change their whole fucking wardrobe. They have to do something different to their hair just to sort of keep up with the fucking Joneses. And that makes no sense at all. It's like, dude, you're going to drive yourself fucking mad.
Yeah.
Having to think that way sounds like a lot of fucking work. So listening to old rock and roll or whatever it is that you like, I don't care if it's Britney Spears or Disney pop or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. If that's your fucking thing, bleed the shit. Bleed it all the time. It never goes anywhere. It's right there fucking in front of you. That's your best friend. You're going to leave your best friend to go make new ones? Fuck no, you're not.
That's something like I figured that one out pretty young, you know, when I was a teenager. I'm like, I would see these bands that you'd see kind of changing styles and trying to like be hip and current. And when we started Black Halos, you know, we started the band in like 94 and it was like grunge and it was Vancouver, you know, and everyone was like, you know, dressing like Lane Staley and we were like just the complete opposite. So I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'm like, this is what we, you know, believe in. This is the kind of band we want to be. And then the irony, of course, is that we ended up signing to Sub Pop, which was like, you know, grunge headquarters. And there were so many people who were like, what the fuck? You know, I've been doing my best Alice in Chains impersonation for a year here. Nobody's interested, you know?
And here comes these guys with the black hair and the eyeliner and stuff. So, I mean, you segue nicely into a question I had. So I remember the first time I heard the Black Halos, I was at Casino El Camino here in Austin, Texas, and anyone familiar with Austin may know Casino. It's a bar on 6th Street. It's sort of like a heavy metal punk rock dungeon, and they're known for their hamburgers, but they're equally known for their jukebox, and the jukebox is amazing.
How many jukebox in Austin, Texas? I guess this is for Dave. How many jukeboxes in Austin, Texas have Rose Tattoo on it?
I don't know, but
that's
I know
my point. That's my point.
Do.
That's my point right there.
And my point is, I'm sitting in there. I used to start all my nights at Casino. I'd start there and then start making my way down the street. But I was in there one time and I heard the Violent Years, and I heard it and I was like, I don't know this song. What is this? This is great. And I got up and I ran over to the jukebox and I found out it's this band, the Black Halos, and the song is called Violent Years. The album's called Violent Years. And I was like, I have to buy this tomorrow, first thing, if I can find it. And so anyway, I get the album and I become a big fan of it. And I noticed, just like you're saying, Rich, it's on Sub Pop Records. It came out at the height of grunge. Jack Endino is the producer who's known for working with all the grunge bands. So was working with Jack and being on Sub Pop a matter of convenience because you guys were in Canada and he was in Seattle, or did you actually hear an album or two that he had done that you went, I want that sound for our band?
Yeah, that's totally what happened. He made 2 records before that you still stand up to this day. He did the Zeke Kicked in the Teeth record.
Ooh, yeah.
And he did a record by this band, The Makers. I don't know if you know them. But
Yeah.
He did The Makers Psychopathia Sexualis record. And both those records are really killer records, great rock and roll records. And they sound totally different from each other, but they're great sounding records. And I'm like, you know, we talked about a lot of different people, but I'm like, you know, Jack's here. He gets the vibe. And he was also the kind of guy that, you know, he was, you know, at the height of grunge, he's like, man, you know, they pay me all this money to go make a Soundgarden record. But he's like, I don't need to make, you know, 10 of those records a year. He goes, I make one of those to pay the bills. And then I make the records I want to make. And so because of that, you know, we could afford him.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he's a guy that, you know, he is famous, I guess, for the whole grunge thing, but, you know, he's produced all kinds of stuff. You know, he did a Bruce Dickinson solo record.
Wow.
You know, he does, you know, he did Helicopters single, I guess he did. And
Super
you know,
Suckers. Didn't he do Super Suckers?
Yeah, I think he did some Super Sucker stuff. You know, he'd done Murder City Devils before us. So
yeah,
he's known for the grunge stuff, but, you know, he's much more well-rounded than that. And, you know, he ended up becoming like a great friend of the band too.
He sounds Renaissance. He sounds like he's got, you know, he can do anything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think he was doing some like Brazilian like kind of trumpet ensemble or something before he came to do our record. He's one of those kind of guys.
Wow.
See, that's a slightly different frequency than the Black Halos.
So,
So that record, before my wife and I got married and lived together, we had this long distance relationship. I was in Austin and she was in Houston, and that record, The Violent Years, was my soundtrack for so many drives between Austin and Houston. And then I turned her onto it, and it sort of became our album, So I've got a lot of great memories associated with it. And it was just, like I said, sort of an accidental discovery, but there's the beauty of music right there, right?
No kidding, man. That's amazing. That means a lot to hear too.
Oh yeah,
it's a great record. And so do you think, having said all that, do you think the record got the push it deserved?
Yeah, probably get the push it deserved. I don't know. I would have liked to have gotten a bigger push, but
it didn't get. Did it get pushed off the cliff? I
yeah. It did like weirdly well here in Canada. Like we were like having video play. It was like on the radio here and stuff, which I just never expected. Right? Because it's we're not really, like I said, we weren't trying to kind of be in fashion at the time, and we weren't trying to chase any kind of sound. We're just like, this is our band. And
yeah,
I guess maybe it was the tail end of like Green Day and all that shit, and radio was looking for like punk bands. That's all I can really think. But
that's valid.
I think it was pretty well promoted, but they just stopped at one point, and they kind of screwed us over. They left us stranded out in like Eastern Canada with a broken van and no money, and long story.
Yeah. Well, so go ahead, Billy.
Jonathan Poneman, I remember it's not his fault. He was on a yogic retreat or something, we were told, on top of a mountain or something, so he couldn't be reached. It's not really his fault. I mean, he's probably in deep meditation or something. I have Otto above him or something, I don't know.
It sounds kind of made up to me, but okay.
Hey, if you're going to come up with an excuse, meditating on a mountain somewhere is a pretty good one.
He can't come to your rescue right now. I know your van is fucked and you're on the side of the road with your finger up your pee hole, but sorry, I'm meditating right now. Fuck you.
I like to picture him there, levitating on top of a mountain with these these guys in robes around him, these Tibetan monks around him doing this. I like to, sort of like still picture that in my head, So
this is definitely what happened.
Yeah.
Well, if that shit was real and he was really, as you said, Billy, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard of stuff with bands with their gurus on tour and some crazy stories that people swear are true. So I don't know. You never know. Rock and roll's a crazy thing.
Yeah.
Our story, if I was to write a book about the Black Halos, no one would believe it. People would be like, yeah, he's just like making this shit up, exaggerating, that couldn't have happened. And I'm like, no, it did. I was there. It's, like Star Wars, the Force is real.
Yeah.
Hello moment.
We started at the top of the conversation. I asked you guys what took so long to get you back together, the two of you back together, along with Jay. But it should be mentioned that one of the reasons you guys broke up back in the day is because your van and all your merch and all your gear got stolen, and that kind of was the end of the band. Is that right?
That was later on. That I think that incident was, I was in Montreal. I was like, so for me, it was like the tail end when our album, Rich wasn't around, Jay wasn't in the band at that point. And our van got stolen in Montreal with our trailer and our gear. And for me, it was like death blow, right? It was like, I wasn't happy at that point anyway. So, it's kind of like gave me the ultimate excuse. That's sort of like, well, guys, see, I don't know if you noticed, but the last album everything I wrote was pretty much about you guys. Now I want out of here. It gave me that sort of music to escort myself out. It's the worst thing, I think it's the thing every band fears. And it's the worst thing. Like, you steal someone's musical equipment, you steal their dog. These are the worst things someone can really do, in my opinion. Stealing a girl or a job, that's not so bad. But once you take someone's gear, and it's like, man, you deserve to die.
Stealing the carpenter's tools, man.
Yeah, just worst thing ever. That's your whole livelihood.
Yeah. Was that the tour? Was that the tour when you were out? You came to Austin to do South by Southwest, and I think you were out with the River City Rebels.
No, it's after that. It's after that. Drums ain't cheap. Let me tell you.
Yeah. My son is a drummer, so I can appreciate that.
Drums ain't cheap.
A lot of people don't realize the cymbal pack is like, your cymbals are fucking like shit. It's brass, but no, it's gold, man. They charge a lot for good cymbals, good sounding cymbals. Fucking pricey.
Yeah.
It's insane too. It's like the biggest instrument. It's like the biggest pain in the ass to haul around. Everything's super expensive. You don't get any of the glamour. I'm like, why does anyone become a drummer, man?
Yeah. Sitting in the back in the dark,
Oh, seriously, right?
Billy,
I guess you get to sit down for the whole show, though, so that's something.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. And in the early days, you're the one lugging your own gear on top of all that too. So yeah, that's
if you're a night ranger, they'll pull you up front for Sister Christian.
Billy, did I hear, or did you tell me, or somewhere through the grapevine, did I hear that you were in the running to be the front man of the revived Dead Boys?
No, that sort of came up one night though, when Rocket from the Tombs was playing in Vancouver, and Cheetah asked me backstage, and I said no. No, I said actually, as I said, I don't want to live in a dead man's shoes, and I didn't think it was cool and right, so I said no gracefully. And then Jeff Magnum at CBGB's, when we played CBGB's, Jeff Magnum was there, and he said, "I have some questions for you." And one of the questions was that, "So Cheetah, he's talking about doing this. What do you think?" And I said, "I told him no already." And he goes, "That's the right answer."
Wow.
And he shook my hand and said, "That's the right answer." And I was like, yeah, and he said, "I heard you guys sound like the Dead Boys. I was watching you guys. I don't hear it." And I was like, yeah, whatever, but no, I said, it's a total compliment if someone says it, you guys are fantastic. But yeah, just, I don't know, it's that thing, like Michael Graves, how do you think he's feeling right now? I think Danzig proved his point. What do you want? When you see the Misfits, I want Danzig singing.
Yeah.
And it's a real hard jump for that stuff. And, when these bands do that now, where it's like, yeah, we've got one member and it's the drummer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always say that with the Dead Boys thing in any of these bands, I say that the Simpsons already did it when they had that episode with, "All right, who likes the Doobie Brothers out there? Because we've got one of them." Right? And, it's that thing. Like Tommy Thayer, I'm sure he's a great guy, but don't sing "Shock Me."
Yeah.
I think any of those gigs are a tough gig to do, and you kind of, you either got to approach it with like a ton of reverence, or you got to approach it like, this is just my job, man,
Yeah.
I've worn those shoes before recently.
Yeah. Jason just filled in a couple gigs fronting Accept.
Oh, see,
yeah,
I just played with Accept in the summer in Germany.
Wow, I just did 4 shows on the East Coast with fronting Accept because their singer was sick.
Wow, I'm sure you were great.
Pretty rad.
Yeah, I'm sure you were great, but Accept without Udo is unacceptable to me.
Yeah, well, see, now you're thinking like me going in, right? But the thing is, Mark Ternillo has been in the band 12 years. I understand your argument fully, bro. But here's the deal. Mark is a legend. He was a PT Quick. He's been around forever. The guy is he's a killer throat, man. He's fucking powerful. He's been in the band for 12 years and done 5 records. He's been in the band longer than Udo was.
I know, but I heard Udo.
But what But dude, what we fell in love with was Udo. So I get it. So trust me, I was channeling Udo more than I was channeling Mark. So.
I saw Udo on tour.
Oh yeah,
when he played here in Vancouver, and I saw Accept when they played, and I have to take Udo's side on that. I have to, because same like the Wasp thing. I'm sorry, but Chris Holmes doing Wasp, that singer he's got is not cutting it. Blackie with the other guys, he's doing a great job.
Yeah.
And I'm just honest. Like Udo, I was like, no, I've seen Udo. I was like, this band is killer, and Udo's killing it. It's very rare. Like Teenage Head, we just saw a Canadian band Teenage Head play, and goes Gordy Lewis, the guitar side, and that's a very rare case where that lineup. I think they only have like the bass player, the only original member, but they did a fantastic job at it. I'm honest. It is that point where it's like, are they really doing a fantastic job? And yeah, they did a great job at it. It's a rare thing, like replacing your singer. I was at the Brian Johnson Back in Black, the first tour here in Vancouver. And I remember the guy who took me was like, Bon Scott, screw this guy. And everyone, they had the banners up, and people were booing. And at the end, he was an older guy. Kurt Copeland was in his legendary gang, the East Van Gang. And, I was just a kid, and I looked up at him, and I'm like, and he goes, he was all right. Let's go back.
He's all right.
Like, yeah. And I was like, oh, Brian Johnson. I was like, yeah, this is really cool. That stuff was really cool, but I had to look at chords still to get the okay. Yeah. And, that's sort of like, I think young kids but there's that point. Like, I know Kid Peele say that the Michael Graves Misfits their favorite, but yeah, I guess maybe it's what you heard first. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's what you fall in love with is what you kind of sort of take to the grave. You take, you're taking that with you because it's your heart. And I mean, we've talked about this on this show 1,000 times, literally. We even had an episode called Replacement Singers.
Yeah.
It was a really hard episode to sort of like grasp. Because, dude, I mean, I like Sammy Hagar, but I'm not going to go listen to Sammy Hagar front Van Halen. No, I'm not going to do it. I love Sammy Hagar, but you know what? I'm not going to go listen. I don't want to hear Sammy Hagar sing Running with the Devil,
Yeah. I think in the case,
that's what's great about music too, right? Taste is subjective. It's like, the Sammy Hagar Van Halen is arguably more successful than the Dave one.
It is technically even by numbers. So
and so obviously more people like those records, But I think mostly, most guys that play music and grew up with that, they're gonna be like, well, you can't beat Dave,
Right.
It's subjective. It's subjective, man.
Yes, it is. It's always going to be.
I think in the case of the Misfits, you have to remember that they were dead and gone, and there was a whole maybe 2 generations of kids that grew up without the Misfits. So when they finally come back with Michael Graves, that's their first opportunity to buy a record, see a concert. So he kind of had an advantage in the fact that the first version of the Misfits was so far removed by a couple of generations even, and that might sort of explain how, like you were talking to Billy, how does some kid favor, the Michael Graves version over the Danzig version. But I wanted to, since Billy's winning the T-shirt contest here today, and since he's obviously been influenced by the great Dan McCafferty, Billy, of course, for those who are listening and not watching, is wearing a Nazareth T-shirt. Tell us a little bit about the importance of Dan McCafferty on your vocal style and your love of rock and roll in general.
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, there's my older brother. He's a couple years older than me. He had this French exchange student come and stay with us. And, we were in elementary school, and I was into Kiss, right? My walls were covered in Kiss pictures. I was totally into Kiss. And he had this jean vest with Nazareth, Expect No Mercy painted on the back and the logo and studs. I remember looking at it going, oh, that's so cool. Hey, where'd you get that? And he's like, oh, this chick I know made it to me. And this is an elementary school kid. Made it for me. And I was like, did you get to do a Kiss one for me? And he looked at me and goes, Kiss is for babies. Nazareth, that's real. And I was like,
Wow.
you know, so I was like, okay, I took him, Nazareth played in that year and recorded the Snaz live album at the Coliseum. And that was at that time. He snuck out my bedroom window. And, you know, like, I think he was about 10 years old. He sneaks out my bedroom window and goes to the Nazareth concert, comes back in the morning, bangs on the window. I let him in, and he's like, you should have come. That was the best thing ever. But anyways, he was so badass doing that stuff and smoking at that age that I was like, oh, yeah, I got to check out Nazareth, right? So I got my favorite album, No Mean City, and I bought that album immediately. And, yeah, I was just like, okay, look as cool as Kiss. At that time, because I was just a kid, and Kiss, the gimmick was, you know, I was sold. But it's like, yeah, they look kind of like old guys, you know, guys got a mustache and stuff, looks like crime. You know, I'm not really down with this. And he's got a bitch snot shirt, and, you know, it's not as cool as Kiss. But I listened to that album, and I was like, oh, yeah, like, this is real gritty. This stuff's really gritty. And, you know, Kiss, well, it used to be gritty in the early days, some of the first couple albums, but by the time I was really getting into Kiss, they were already starting with the hitting that kid market. And Nazareth weren't like that. They were still singing about whiskey and, you know, getting stabbed and stuff like that. So I was really turned on by that and the badassery of it. And of this kid, Mark, from Quebec, that introducing me to Nazareth. So, yeah, it really sold me. And I say it all the time, like, the vocal styling, you know, I was born with this golden voice. And when you're born with a voice like this, you I remember like being told, yeah, you're never going to make it as a singer, kid, and that thing. But then you hear guys like that and you're like, oh, yeah, well, he's got a voice kind of like mine too. And yeah, it's kind of gritty and, you know, yeah, sharp and gritty. I like that. There's someone doing, you know, Dan McCafferty, I interviewed him and he gave me some great advice. That was in the 90s. He gave me some great advice. I said, you know, how do you get your voice like that and keep your voice like hitting those high notes and stuff? And how do you keep your voice in such great shape? And you've been doing it for years. And he goes, I drink whiskey and I smoke cigarettes.
Yeah.
He goes, Robert Plant, we played with Robert Plant, and he's like, what temperature is the oxygen in this room? And he goes, worry about this stuff. I just go in, I guess, say, give me my whiskey. I take a drink of whiskey and I light a cigarette and I say, let's get to work. And I was like, you know, great advice. Thank you, Dan McCafferty. And yeah, what a great, you know, just one of those voices. I got an email actually when he was first quitting, he was first retiring, and asking if I wanted to go and audition.
Wow.
And from him, actually, from when I had interviewed him, and the email address, I think I still have it somewhere, from the email address that he had sent the interview to, because it was we did over the phone and then an email interview, questions, both versions. And that email, he's like, yeah, I was wondering if you're interested in retiring. I was wondering if you'd like to come and try out. I think you'd be great. And same thing where we were talking about, I was like, I can't hit the highs in Telegram, man. The start of Telegram, that screaming high that he hits, when he goes, God, the Telegram tonight. I'm like, I can't hit that note, right? But then I watched the guy they got now. No offense to him. Sure, he's a nice guy. But I don't think he's cutting it. You know, I really don't think he's cutting it. Maybe that was what I said to Dan when I sent the email back to Dan. I said, you're irreplaceable. Your voice is irreplaceable. I wouldn't want to hear the band with anyone else singing. I think the band should retire if you retire. Because honestly, that voice, that's what I want. When I hear Shanghai to Shanghai, I want that voice, right?
Of course.
We played a festival in Finland a few years ago with Michael, and we pulled up, you know, into the backstage, and it was pretty quiet backstage, and there was just a guy sitting at a table there drinking whiskey, and we're on the bus, and we're like, is that Dan McCafferty? And it was, and it turned out he was playing the same festival with us. Wow. And so he was just sitting on his own, just drinking whiskey at this little table. Yeah. And so we went over, you know, we talked to him, and he, you know, super gracious, really nice guy, but in really bad health, you know. Yeah. And I didn't realize the extent of how bad it was until he came out on stage, and it was just him. And he had a backing tape of like Nazareth from the 70s. It was like a live show, but just the band. And a guy had to kind of, put his arm around him and walk him out onto the stage to a chair at the front. And he sat in his chair, and they just lowered the mic to him. And Michael came out and introduced him. And you could see the crowd was like, what is this dude sitting in the chair with no band, And then the first song kicks in, and he just starts singing, and that voice comes out. And the whole place gets to their feet,
Wow.
and if everyone went nuts, and we're all side of the stage, and I'm looking around side stage, and there's like not a dry eye in the house. You know what I mean? It was unreal. And you could tell like he was struggling, like, the guy can barely walk, but man, he could sing.
Wow.
Oh,
Unbelievable.
I literally got goosebumps as you were telling that story.
I'm getting verklempt over here.
Wow. And Michael,
seriously, man, we're like grown men at the side of the stage, like crying watching this. You know what I mean?
I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry so bad the other day, but I had to power through that. Hey, Billy, you just became the coolest motherfucker in the room.
you were asked to audition for Nazareth. Wow.
Yeah. But it's that thing, like, come on, man. Like, no, as I say, that voice, that guy, like, I say, certain singers, like Roy Orbison, he opens his mouth just a little bit and the angels fly out.
Yeah.
He opens his mouth and it's like a shrieking banshee, right? Comes tearing out there.
Yeah.
It's like a
No, he changed the world, man. He changed the fucking world.
Oh.
Yeah. I think we can all agree that one of the greatest of all time and a huge loss the other day. So cheers to you, Dan McCafferty. Thanks for all the music. Speaking of the music, are you guys going to tour this new album? And more importantly, are you going to get to North America where I can see you, Texas specifically? I'm being greedy here.
It's like the $1 million question. I mean, we just announced a bunch of dates in January, just in Canada, like West Coast and Ontario here. Because everyone's got day jobs now. I mean, that's the truth of it. So if we do stuff, it's got to make sense. That makes sense in terms of like, is it going to help the band? But also like, are we going to make some money?
Yeah, sure.
Being brutally honest, like that's what it is. We're not 25. We're not going to get in the band for 6 months like we used to. But we are going to tour. It just really depends. How the record's received, what kind of offers we get. If we can drag people away from their jobs for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We do plan on working the record for sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, I hope so, because it's a really strong record and it drops November 25th. Is that right?
That's right. 2 weeks today, man.
Okay. So by the time this episode is posted, the album will be out. It's well worth grabbing. It's awesome. I've been listening to it nonstop for a couple weeks now. And it's a great return from the Black Halos. I hope it puts you on the road. I hope it's, as you said, well received and successful for you guys. Because I want you guys to stick together as a band, man. I really like every time you get together, you produce great results. So
thank you.
Congratulations on the album. And,
thanks.
And thanks for being on the Talk Louder podcast today. We appreciate you guys.
And thanks so much for having us. It was really great to talk to both of you guys.
Yeah,
and Billy too.
Yeah. You don't see much of him, do you? Yeah. All right, guys. On behalf of my co-host Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave, along with our special guest today, Rich Jones and Billy Hopeless from the Black Halos.